Hey guys, it's Miss Boyce and Miss Dow. Hope you're having a good day. So we're moving on to it's still part, like the discriminant is still part of this, but we're moving on to the whole quadratic formula now. And what the quadratic formula does is it solves for x. The discriminant, here we go, I'm gonna actually move this. So let's just remember, a reminder here that the discriminant, if it's greater than 0, so remember what's underneath the radical, what's underneath the square root. So if that's greater than 0, there are two solutions. If it's equal to 0, there's one solution. And if it's less than 0, there's no real solution. So we still need to keep that in mind, but now we're going to actually use the whole formula. And again, what you're solving for is x, because if we're not able to solve it by factoring or by graphing or by taking square roots, then we use the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy. I'm going to put my shade up here. Okay, so we can figure out that that a is 2, right? That's the guy attached to the x squared. B is -5, and C is 3. Okay, so we're going to plug that into this formula. When we plug in, what's really important is that you have to remember to put it in parentheses. Put what you're plugging in into parentheses. It just is a kind of a helpful reminder to know what to do then in those parentheses. So let's take a look at what I did. So you see I have a negative, right? That's from the negative B. And then my B is a -5. So that's why I put that in parentheses. So it's really a negative B. We sometimes look at it as an opposite B. Plus or minus the square root of our B, which is -5 squared, minus 4 times A, which we know is 2, times C, which is 3, all divided, the whole thing is divided by 2A, and A, remember, is 2. Okay, so that's what your setup should look like. So now where do we go from here? Well, let's take care of this -5. What does that really become? Good, that really becomes a 5, right? What does our -5 squared comes? That becomes 25. And if you do 4 times 2 times 3, that's 24 with that negative in between, right? That minus 24 in between. All divided by, and 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so now let's simplify even further. All we're doing from here is simplifying. Okay, so we go 25 minus 24, we know is the square root of 1. So we know how many answers we should have because this number 1 is greater than 0. So we're going to have two solutions. Now, what is the square root of 1? Well, the square root of 1, right? Simply 1. Okay, so that's actually what I'm going to write in my formula. And I'm going to split up this plus or minus. This plus or minus is going to get separated. So watch what I do. I do 5 plus 1 divided by 4, and then I do 5 minus 1 divided by 4. That's what I mean by dividing up or separating that plus and minus, right? Here's the plus, here's the minus. The square root of 1 we know is 1. That's where I'm getting all that from. All right, and now we're actually, again, simplifying. 5 plus 1 is 6 divided by 4. 5 minus 1 is 4 divided by 4. And let's simplify those further. And what do I get? We get 6 divided by 4, we know is 3/2, or 1.5 you could have had. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. Okay, so that's example 1. Let's take a look at the next example. The next example is more like a try. So if you want to pause this and then try it, why don't you go for that and then come back to me. And welcome back if you paused it and came back to me. Let's take a look. Oh, look at that yellow. Ooh. There we go. That's a nice color. Okay. So here we go. We have A equals 1, B equals -6, and C equals 5. Very similar to what we just did in example 1. So let's plug in what we have. Let's make sure that you have that plugged in. Remember, in parentheses. So it's a -b, but our b is also negative. So that guy's going to become positive. -6 squared is positive 36, minus 4 times 1 times 5 is 20, all divided by 2 times A, and A was 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Let's keep it going. Let's simplify. 6 plus or minus the square root of 16. And remember, what do we know? We know that the square root of 16 is 4. So let's simplify that. So now we separate the plus and the minus. 6 plus 4 divided by 2. 6 minus 4 divided by 2. And then let's do 6 plus 4 is 10 divided by 2 is 5 is one of our answers. 2 divided by 2, 1 is our other answer. And remember, we know we had two answers because this number inside the square root is greater than 0. All righty. Let's take a look because the next two examples are very similar, but the answers are going to be different. Okay, so let's take a look. Here, let's take a look at this guy. All right, so at this point, you can plug in on your own. Let's see what you get. So take a look at 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. Okay, so that means that this 4 times 1 times negative 10 was really, this guy here is a negative 40, but that means I have a minus negative 40. So we know that that becomes a plus 40. All right, well, 41 can't be broken down. There's no perfect square that goes into it, that divides into it. So we're good. We can actually leave our answer as is, just a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 41 divided by 2. Okay, let's take a look at the next example. I like that color. Let's take a look at the next example. So same thing. Let's plug in what we know. There we go. Let's plug in what we know, right? Opposite negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Again, notice what you have here. It's a negative 4 times a negative 3 times a 7, or 4 times negative 3 times 7. Either way, what you get out of the minus negative is a positive 84. Okay, so now what we're left with is a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 88 divided by negative 6. So we are allowed to break down that square root of 88. If you go back to your perfect square list, the biggest perfect square that divides into 88 is 4. So we have the square root of 4 times the square root of 22. And how does that then break down? What is the square root of 4? The square root of 4 is 2. And what you're left with is the square root of 22. So let's put that in our simplification fraction, right? Our simplified fraction, which is, hold on, I wrote it down, which is this guy right here, right? All I did from, let's see, let me move up a little bit. From the square root of 88 is I made it to root 2. I got that by over here, right? By doing my work over here. Okay, and then the last simplification, if you can see it, is notice what the actual numbers, not the square root, that stays by itself, but look at the numbers, 2, negative 2, 2, and 6. Well, what goes into all of those numbers? Good, 2. So if I divide each of these numbers by 2, watch what I get. A negative 2 divided by 2, I get a negative 1. 2 divided by 2, I get a 1. So I actually didn't even write it there. It's an invisible 1 because that square root of 22 is there. And negative 6 divided by 2, I get a negative 3. So here is your final simplified answer. That was a little bit tricky because we had to simplify the radical, simplify the square root, and then simplify again with our regular numbers. All right, so take a look at that again if you need to for any help. And let us know if you need help with that. And then the next page is try. So why don't you pause it, give it a try, and come back to me. And welcome back. Take a look at your answers here. Take a look at the answers. We should have gotten, and notice that one of the square roots was 0, so we know we're only getting one answer. So I actually even split it up for you here, but it is negative 4 plus 0, negative 4 minus 0. You're still going to get the same thing. No matter what, you're going to get negative 4 divided by negative 2, and that means that x has to be a positive 2. And then take a look over here. What do I get? I got 4, and let me move up a little bit. Let's make sure you guys plugged it all in correctly, simplified correctly. Notice what I get. I get a negative 20. And we know what happens when I have a negative under the square root. Oh, what? Got my marker on. It is no real solution. Remember, if you have negative under the radical, that's your discriminant. So if that is less than 0, there is no real solution. Okay, give the Google form a try. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of the day.